Salutations once again to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. So what am I going to say now? Well, I have a short message about arrogation and the double entendre of the word and acronym WHO, WHO. Double entendre is French, of course, double entendre, and it means something to be heard or understood in two ways. Entendre means to understand. Je t'entends. I understand you. So, WHO is an acronym, and it is also an English word. Spanish equivalent being quien, French equivalent being qui. But this message, of course, applies to the English idiom and the way it works in that language. Quite simply, it goes like this. In many cases in English, a question that begins with the word who will have an answer identical to the question. For instance, who are the authorities? Well, the answer to that question is the same statement without the question mark. Who are the authorities? The authorities are who? It's an acronym for the authorities. So you can ask the question, who is behind the Great Reset? And the answer is the same as the question. Who is behind the Great Reset? The authorities. The archons, as we say in Gnostic jargon. Of course, there are various ways to describe the archons, but primarily they are those people living among us who lord it over other people, who consider themselves to be more righteous than thou, and who entitle themselves to the position of telling others how they need to live, how they must live, how they're going to live, and also entitling themselves to boss other people around and to give them orders. Those are the authorities in the most simple and elementary description of the word. If you reflect on it for a moment, you see that it works really well. It's a proposition that clarifies the situation and clarifies your mind. Who is behind the great hoax of COVID-19, which is a provable and proven medical hoax? Those people who want to give orders to the world and to tell people how they must live and how they must behave in every single detail of their lives. Now, here's another way to play this proposition. What about WHO as an acronym? You know, acronyms, three-letter designations, CIA, CDC, FBI, WEF, IMF. Many of the authorities, many of the agents of authority in the world use these three-letter designations. So I'm going to propose a translation of the acronym WHO It stands for whoever has orders to follow. So you see, who is not simply those who give the orders, but who, in the more comprehensive sense, also includes those who follow the orders. Whoever has orders to follow is also who. So, who might be you, and you might be someone who has orders to follow if you submit to the authorities and if you comply with their commands. Now, there is an activity called arrogation. And I teach arrogation, you could say. I'm a teacher and a writer, and I consider that my students, my true students, are my friends and allies. So I teach my allies arrogation. Arrogation simply means talking back, and specifically it means talking back to the authorities, not only to those who give orders, but also to those who follow orders, who comply with the authorities. There is a specific technique, a basic technique of arrogation. And I'd like to explain that to you in the remaining moments of this short message. I want to suggest a concise way to talk back to the authorities in all instances, in all cases. So if who stands for whoever has orders to follow, and you want to distinguish yourself from that group, this is how you can do it. This is how you can make a radical statement of your autonomy. Not an assertion of your rights, by the way. Rights have nothing to do with it. Rights are illusions given to you by the authorities so that they can control you in two ways. They can either pretend to support your rights, or they can threaten to take away your rights. Your autonomy has nothing to do with rights and everything to do with the responsibility you take to act as a free agent in the world. So here it comes. Here is my primary principle, the primary principle I propose for expressing your autonomy through arrogation. First of all, it's important to remember that you don't have to talk to the authorities. In fact, you have no obligation whatsoever to talk to the police or law enforcement officers. And there are tutorials on the internet that explain this in some detail. I think one of the mistakes that people are making who are protesting the draconian measures of the moment and who are objecting to the globalist masterminds with their plan for a great reset, I think one of the mistakes that the protesters make is that they talk too much to the authorities. But silence is powerful, and silence is also a weapon and a tool of autonomy. So anytime that you find yourself in a situation where you might be talking to the authorities, for instance, the police, always remember that you don't have to say anything to them. And it is not a crime not to speak to them. Although, of course, they may try to convince you and lie to you and tell you that it is. But if you do decide to speak to the authorities, what can you say to them that is a clear and uncompromising assertion of your autonomy? Well, you say, I do not take orders from anyone. That's all you have to say. That statement, I do not take orders from anyone, is something that you can hold in your body. It is a statement of force. It is a force. And it is a force that gives you your stance in the world. So you have a stance against the authorities. You stand before them strong and firm and upright. It's as if that statement, I do not take orders from anyone, is a material force in your body. It's like a band of iron that stands vertically in your body from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet on the ground. It's a force that you carry by embodiment, and you can also say it in words. Now, I advise not talking to the authorities, giving them the silent treatment as far as possible. But of course, in some instance where it might be appropriate to say more, you can say this, for instance, specifically to police. You can tell them, I inform you of your role. I inform you of your moral and legal responsibility, which is to serve and protect the public. I remind you that you are sworn to do that. You can say that to the authorities in a very firm but indifferent sort of way, merely as a cold statement of fact, and say it in a cold and indifferent way with the implication that you don't give a damn whether they know it or not. You know it, and that's what matters. And if you sense in a situation that it might be appropriate to say a little more, you can add this. Your role as an agent of the law is to serve and protect the public. And in some instances, perhaps, you can advise the public. You can advise me of something. But it is my choice to follow your advice or not. I do not take orders from anyone. And in the rare instance when I might listen to your advisements, when you speak of rules and regulations which are not lawful, then I am free to choose to follow your advisement or not. Period. End of conversation. That is a tactic of arrogation, talking back to the authorities. Additional to this tactic and stemming from this tactic, there is another tactic that you can use. That would be the assertion of liability. So you see, every person who wears a uniform, which is just a costume, it might have been bought from a costume supply store where they sell masquerade costumes for Halloween. Everyone who stands in front of you posing as an authority wearing a costume is just another human person like you. And so, although they may appeal to authority and try to order you to do something, they are no different than any stranger off the street without the costume who orders you to do something. It comes down to person confrontation. And in that context, anyone who speaks to you in the illusion of authority is liable for how they act upon you and influence you. They are personally and individually liable. And this assertion of liability is now coming into definition right now at the beginning of 2021 in a remarkable and vivid way. And I expect it to become known as an effective tactic for opposing and defeating you know who, the authorities. So anyone who attempts to force you to do something that you don't want to do is personally liable for violating your freedom, not your rights, but your freedom. And that individual, that person, no matter what costume they're wearing, can be prosecuted in that way. So there is a threat contained in the assertion of liability, and I expect that more and more people, greater numbers of people in this year will come to understand how to apply that threat. After all, the authorities are doing nothing but threaten you constantly. But did you know that you can threaten them back? And this is how you can do it. I won't elaborate more on that at the moment, but it is a key tactic in arrogation. So there it is. Carry it in your body like a force, because it is a force. I do not take orders from anyone. That is the primary statement of autonomy. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you, as usual, in the beauty to come.